session today. It looks like we've just started the recording. Just to let you know, we will record the session today. I have everyone on mute at the moment. We may have a chance for a bit of discussion uh, later in the hour, depending how the time rolls. But we may have anywhere from 30 to 50 attendees, so that might be a little crunchy. However, I do have the chat feature open today, so please feel free to open your chat feature. We will try and use it a few times throughout this session, along with a couple of other ways just to keep this a little bit interactive. And lastly, as we're all, many of us are working from home, as I am, I will just let you know that my co-pilot is here in the house with me, my little dog, who's very good at guarding and may start barking in the background at any time. So I apologize for that in advance in case it happens. Today, welcome to the session entitled Think Inside the Box. The reason we've called it that is because of a leadership training concept that I've developed with my partner, Amy McKee. You might be able to see the box in the background here. I'll talk a bit more towards the end of the session about that. But over the last year, Amy and I have been trying to think about ways that we can help support our community, both hospitality and beyond, during the very trying times of crisis during the pandemic. And early on in the year, we identified 5 key leadership traits that we believe leaders should be leaning on during these very difficult times. And you can see them listed up here on the screen. So we very much wanted to help businesses through strategic one-day sessions prepare their businesses to come out of COVID stronger than their time during COVID. However, we realized through many conversations with businesses that there was a lot of interest in these topics, and that's why we're going to aim to focus on these today. Excuse me. But before we start, let me just introduce myself. I'm Donald Bowman. I see a few familiar names that have signed in today. Some of you know me already, but for those that don't, I've been managing luxury and lifestyle hotels my entire career, having started in a little tea shop in the heart of the oldest part of Edinburgh in Scotland, and became fascinated with the world of hospitality. Throughout that, I've spent probably almost 20 years with Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group, and some of these other brands that you see on the slide. And really, I feel like I've dedicated my entire career to service excellence, the world of luxury, leadership, and building strong cultures. And as I decided to start my own business after hanging up my keys as the general manager at the Waldorf Astoria here in Las Vegas, as well as the Mandarin Oriental before that, I decided to start my own business doing hotel consulting, but actually focusing specifically on helping companies create strong cultures that support service excellence. I've been able to take the knowledge that I built up over the years running luxury hotels and build it into practical ways to change cultures in a way that will stick. And as I mentioned, I've also partnered with my colleague, Amy McKee, to develop Rethink and Reset, this leadership strategies concept that I mentioned a second ago. So what we do and why we're here today, this call came about from a call from with Diane at the NHLA. Diane and Irving do amazing work. Congratulations and thanks to them for all the support they give our industry. I'd mentioned that we've created these leadership training boxes, and we were talking about the needs of the industry, and that led to this presentation today. So that's one element of what I do. The other is creating cultures of world-class service excellence, as I mentioned. I also do facilitating, leadership retreats, hotel consulting assistance with pre-openings and much, much more. But today we're going to focus on the leadership traits because of the crisis that we continue to live through. These 5 leadership traits that we believe will help you come out of this even stronger. So how can you benefit from today the most from this session? I would imagine that some of you may have, well, maybe you haven't because you've joined yet another webinar, but I know a lot of people are going through webinar fatigue, as I call it. We're just a bit tired of dialing into webinars, and we usually do a lot of multitasking while we're on there and checking email and catching a few sound bites. So today I'm going to talk through each of these 5 leadership traits, not in full, we don't have time for that, but a few key things that I think you could take away. Particularly if this is a leadership trait that perhaps you feel that you're not as strong as you would like to be on. So I encourage you to take great notes as I'm blethering on today, and maybe ask a few questions or track the answers to a few questions as you take those notes. Think about what you might do differently as a result of the content of today's conversation. Think about what you can take away and share with your teams that might benefit them as well. And as we go through these leadership traits, think about what trait you could focus on to improve a little bit more. Now, I talked about webinar fatigue as well, and I'm going to we'll try this. It's not an experiment. I've done it before with great success, but it doesn't always work for everybody. But I do want us to be able to try and interact, even though it's a fairly large group on the call today. So there's a few ways we'll try and do that. So let's set those up right now. The first is to use the chat feature. I have my chat box open at the moment, and I would encourage you to open yours as well. You can do so by clicking on chat in your menu bar there. It should show up with that little balloon. And then I may ask some questions. I will ask some questions throughout the session, and I'd love to just see your responses rather than hear them. So please type away. I'm also going to try and use this annotate feature just to get everyone engaged with some of the topics. There's 2 ways I'm going to suggest that we do that. First of all, I would ask that you find your annotate button. It should be, if you have it, it should be on your main menu where you see your mute button and your video button, and there should be a little button that says annotate with a sort of a little pencil there. If you click on that, hopefully you'll then see a new additional menu come up. And if you click on the spotlight button, you'll see two options. We're going to use that arrow option, whereby you can actually mark on your screen where you would like to select an answer. Ah, good. Kay Key has their annotate button working. Good job. So does Elizabeth. Great. Then there's one more way that we'll try and interact, and that is to use the stamp feature within Annotate. And you can use either the check mark, or you could use the star if you like, or the heart. Karen likes hearts. That's very sweet. Elizabeth likes stars. She's probably got 5 of them. And we'll use these as well just to check how we're interacting throughout this process. Now I'll see, I should be able to clear all those for now, and we'll carry on. Thanks for experimenting, and thanks for joining me in interacting today. So here are the 5 leadership traits that we're going to discuss today: positivity, urgency, vision and communication, creativity and innovation, and empowerment. So let's get straight to the interaction. I'd like you to go to your annotate spotlight arrow, the ones that we saw right at first. And I'd like you to use that to click next to the leadership trait that you believe is the most important of those 5. Very good, Elizabeth's already on the way. And if you click somewhere and you don't like it, you can re-click and move it somewhere else. See a lot coming up for vision and communication here, and positivity. Oh, couple for empowerment, that's good. And another vision in communication. Great. Let me ask you a second question. Click the one that you think of these 5 you're strongest at. Which of these leadership traits do you think is a strength of yours? Ah, quite a varied selection here. Very good. Oh, we'd make a dynamic team. We've got a very good balance of skills on the call today. Very good. Well, let's see if I change your mind by the end of this session. So I'm going to share a few thoughts and insights on each of these. Again, not going into nearly as much depth as I would like, but to give you a few, maybe a few triggers of thought that might encourage you to stay a bit more focused on these in current times. So let's start with creativity and innovation. Let me just clear those. Well, why are we talking about creativity and innovation as being very important at this time? I'd say last year we learned about the rapid implementation of creativity and innovation, whether we wanted to or not. Back in March, lockdown was announced here in Las Vegas and across the world, maybe not in March, but as different countries and different parts of the world were hitting these times of crisis. And we went into lockdown. And never before, I don't think, have so many businesses been forced to be creative and innovative in something like 72 hours. Everyone's paradigms shifted in 3 days. We were given 3 days to prepare to do business differently. We had to exercise creativity and flexibility to do this, but with a great sense of urgency. Again, you'll see many of these 5 traits tying into each other. So that's one very good reason why this is so important in a crisis. We had to learn how to go virtual within 3 days. We had to learn how to shut a business down in 3 days or pivot and change how we do business. There was so much that we had to change in the snap of a finger. And it was a reminder that creativity and innovation was a leadership trait that was going to see us through times of crisis like these. So let's talk about creativity a little bit first. Here's a long definition of creativity that says it's the ability to transcend traditional ideas, rules, patterns, relationships, or similar, and to create meaningful new ideas, forms or methods of doing things that create originality, progressiveness, or imagination. I think it's one of the most powerful and valued skills out there. Describing it's actually not that easy, and that's a very long-winded description. But it gives you a good idea of what we mean by creativity. If we think back to our days as a child, or if we have children, or spend time with children, you know that children are born with creativity. They're constantly learning, but don't yet know how things go together. And that allows them to have a rich creative fantasy, and you know their imaginations run wild, and really you see a lot of creativity. As we get older, we learn what things do fit together. We learn how the world runs. And that serves actually to shut down our levels of creativity very often. So we have to keep retraining ourselves to be creative and be aware of our surroundings, allowing ourselves to think beyond the normal conventions. So suddenly, back in March, we had to think about how do we close down a massive building? What do we have to do to reopen a building? How do we operate at 50%? How do we provide entertainment? How do we check people in? How do we keep our employees safe? And these images on here are just signs of the creativity that came of how our business needed to evolve and how we needed to use creativity to do so. If we then talk about innovation, I see that as slightly different. Innovation refers to something brand new, not just a change to an existing product, but something that is created new that didn't exist before. Some perfect examples up here online. The first electric light bulb back at the early 1800s was invented. A lot of people might think that was Thomas Edison's idea. It was actually Humphrey Davy who invested the first one. Thomas Edison produced one that could be mass produced. But that was as a result of 25 years of innovative thinking. The Tesla, the first electric vehicle manufactured at scale. Imagine you're back in the 1980s. If someone said that you could drive such a car, you would think you were in the movie Back to the Future. Just couldn't even imagine such a thing. Then, of course, we see mega resorts. This week, of course, we're remembering and celebrating the legendary visionary, Mr. Adelson, who really was very innovative in his life. And think about the fact that he invented the integrated mega resort concept when he built the Venetian and Sansa Expo Center together. And then the iPhone, created by Steve Jobs, and his quote when he would talk about this really, I think, resonates with the concept of innovation. A lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them. So you've really got to figure out what is new. And all of these things, I think, help us understand innovation. It's about designing something people need before they know they need it, or something that we've never seen before or had difficulty imagining. So this topic is about reinventing and reimagining. And now, during these difficult times, is a time to really lean on this skill or this trait and say, are you running your business the right way, the best way, or a way that will benefit it more? How can you pivot to provide your guests with what they need? Has your customer gone? Is your product now irrelevant? And if so, how do you reinvent your business? You need to brainstorm with your teams and change your mindsets to give new ideas a chance. I'd be interested now just to hear a few of your thoughts. If you open your chat function, just type in there any things that you've seen done here in Las Vegas or anywhere really, that have been creative approaches to operating differently during the pandemic. Does anyone have any ideas that spring to mind? Curbside pickup, a perfect example. Restaurants that used to be full to the gills couldn't even have anyone in them, let alone just 25% now. And so many restaurants pivoted very quickly to curbside pickup, curbside check-in, delivery of everything. Oh my gosh, it's like Christmas every day at my house. There's always a delivery. Mobile check-in, absolutely. Using robotics and technology in new ways. You saw that QR code for menus. I love the fact that you can now use QR codes to pay your check without touching anything. These are all perfect examples of reinventing and reimagining how we do business. And now is the time to use creativity and innovation more than ever and ask if you're running your business the right way. And then you need to use positivity, urgency, empowerment, and vision to deliver on it. And once again, you'll see that many of these leadership traits all tie together. Thanks for your chat suggestions there. With each of these, I thought it might be a good idea to share some recommended reading on the topic. And there's a fairly, it's not a recent book, but by Seth Godin, Purple Cow, Transform Your Business by Being Remarkable, being different, using creativity and innovation to stand out from the crowd. I saw him speak at a conference last year, well, a virtual one, of course, and he's a really powerful thought leader in this domain, and I would highly recommend his book if you want to dig a little deeper on that topic. Now let's talk a bit about empowerment. Empowerment is down to the people you work with in many cases. So take a moment and think of your best boss ever. And then take another moment and think about your worst boss ever. We've all got at least one of each. And in the chat window, no names, please. But in the chat window, Share a couple of brief reasons why you thought your best boss was your best boss. What made that boss so great? What suggestions have you got there? Don't be shy. They talk straight, they encourage their team. Very good. And I'll stop talking, by the way, until I see you chat more. Imagine we were here in person. I'd actually go up and ask you to your face. Can't quite do that. So please, please do chip in with the chats. They're transparent, they communicate it openly, they're encouraging. I love to see communication come up frequently. I'm going to talk more about that just shortly. Rather than telling me what I did wrong, she made suggestions. That's brilliant. Trusted. That I think we'll come up to. Now, think about your worst boss ever. This one's a lot more fun. Think about your worst boss ever. And I definitely don't want any names here, but yeah, Pat's already chiming in. What made them a bad boss? Micromanaging, taking credit, didn't trust, didn't communicate, belittled. You're warming up here. Good job, audience. I wouldn't need to be picking on anyone if we were all together in person. Yes, absolutely. And I think this boils down, so much of this bad boss syndrome boils down to almost a lack of empowerment, of which a huge element is trust. Oh dear. Yeah, it sounds like there was some pretty bad bosses out there. Nobody likes yelling in public. So how do you make employees feel more empowered? There are many ways to do that. Some people might give them guardrails. You know that in the hotel world, that's quite common, where we say, you're empowered to do whatever feels right for the guest in that moment, but it better not cost more than maybe $200. Do you remember the old days of Ritz-Carlton's excellence? I shouldn't say old days. They're still fantastic at service and empowerment. But you know, employees were given a dollar value that they had to use to feel empowered to use throughout the course of a year. Guardrails might be options that you give your colleagues on how to resolve problems, so they know that they can just go ahead without asking permission. Or sometimes just through trust. Trust came up a lot of times as we talked about the bad boss traits. But if you trust and you demonstrate trust, and there's a genuine sense and feeling of trust that colleagues have from their bosses, then they will feel empowered because they know their bosses trust them to do the right thing. It also takes repeatedly communicating, reminding your team that they are empowered and they should feel empowered. And of course, we shouldn't be berating them loudly in public, as Debbie mentioned happened with her old boss. We can't chastise them in private or in public. In fact, you do the opposite. You should celebrate them when you've heard or witnessed that they've done something where they felt empowered. You should celebrate that publicly. You should share examples of it to encourage it. And you know, there's Monday morning quarterbacking, part of which is saying, great job. You really did a great job turning that difficult situation around, or coming up with a new solution in these difficult times. But, you know, once you've given that compliment, you could always share feedback on how they might try something different in the future, but not take away from this very supportive, trusting environment that leaves your team feeling empowered. And empowerment is going to create strong results for you. And that's the reason it's so important right now, as we have to move fast and we have to be creative and come up with innovative solutions. Our teams need to feel empowered to do that. And you want a dynamic team that will do what it takes to change your business in these difficult times, to do what it takes to adapt to new market conditions, and to keep finding new customers or finding ways to keep existing customers. Look, you've all hired great people to work with you. They're often experts in their own fields. Let them be experts. Let their brilliance rise to the top. Listen to their ideas and suggestions. Don't be the loudest voice in the room. I think someone said their worst boss was the only one you could ever hear. In fact, I always say you should be the last person to be heard, because you should always be listening to the ideas and suggestions that are coming from creativity and innovation that we're relying on. By doing this, you're going to accelerate your change. You're going to continually build their loyalty, satisfaction, and you're going to create stronger results and quicker outcomes. And statistically, it's proven that they will give you 25% more effort if they feel empowered. In fact, if you micromanage and they don't feel empowered, they're likely to only be functioning at 60 to 75% of their maximum output. I've got an amazing reading recommendation on this topic, and it's a book called Multipliers by Liz Wiseman. This is by far the best business book I have ever read. It is my favorite business book. The cover fell off. I don't even have the cover left. It's thumbed. It's got dog ears and turned down corners and notes all over it. There's no better book to learn about how to do everything that we've just talked about. It also teaches you about how you may be accidentally diminishing. The diminisher is the opposite of a multiplier, who's that good boss. The diminisher is that bad boss that you were describing. The multiplier lets their team be the experts, is never the only voice in the room, is the last voice in the room, and much, much more. So if there was one book I would say go and read in the next month or two, this is one that I would underscore. So now let's talk about positivity. Why have I got number one up here? Anyone, and I saw a few familiar names signing in today, anyone that knows me will know that this crisis or not, pandemic or not, I believe is the single most important trait of any leader: positivity. A positive leader gives a sense of hope. A positive leader creates a sense of calm. A positive leader shares a plan and creates a plan. I think about the days when I was running hotels as a GM, and I think about the power of positivity that the positive style had on the team. It gave them all a can-do attitude. It spilled down very rapidly. Think about a morning meeting. If any of you are in hotels or have worked in hotels, many of you have. Every hotel has a morning meeting, or a department has a staff lineup. Imagine me going into a morning meeting as a general manager on a day where we're 100% last night, 100% tonight. We've got the biggest turn of the year. We've got two groups, one leaving, one arriving. The one leaving has a guaranteed late checkout, and the one arriving has a guaranteed early arrival. Whoops. We've got every part of the meeting space full, and I walk into that meeting hanging my head, shaking it, going, well, good morning, everyone. I don't know why I said good, because it's just a morning. There's nothing good about today. I have no idea how we're going to get through the day. It'll be over in 24 hours. Let's just hope we survive. How do you think that management team would go back to their departments to embrace the challenge ahead of them? Sure, some of you have been in that situation. Sounds like a scene from The Office. Or coming in, bouncing with energy and excitement, saying, I cannot wait for today. This is going to be an amazing day. I know it looks like we'll never get through it, but here are the things that we're going to do. And after reeling those off, allowing the team to start contributing, oh my gosh, that's great. What we can also do in food and beverage is set up a complimentary drink station in the lobby. And the ideas start spilling. And suddenly everyone's revved up and ready to go. And I said, by the end of today, we will feel so proud that we still delivered luxury, even facing a very, very difficult time. Imagine now how those managers go back to their departments and how that sense of can do is pervades through the entire organization. Positivity, the single most important trait of a leader, but certainly now more than ever, we need it when times have been pretty dark. So positive leaders ensure they have a like-minded team, don't really tolerate naysayers or people that don't believe things can happen. In fact, those leaders confront that negativity and manage it out. Leaders have a positive vocabulary. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. They create united teams that love working together and want to help each other. They build strong relationships with and amongst others. They pursue excellence. They always want to be associated with the best. They want to be the best. They want to do the best. They're strong, they're energetic, and they've got grit. These are the leaders that are surviving in these difficult times. And I mentioned positive vocabulary. I think this is really, really, really a powerful point in positivity. Imagine every morning you wake up and say, it's a good day to have a good day. Easy to say, not always easy to do when you're really feeling overwhelmed or in a dark spot. Think about when you go to work, when we're working in person, we're always greeting each other when we see each other for the first time that day. So, how are you doing today? Now, this is a risk, I suppose, but there's a few people on the call that have worked with me. So in the chat box, what do you remember I might say if you ask me how I'm doing today? God willing, there is someone here that's worked with me. I saw a few familiar names. Or what might you imagine I would say if you ask me how I'm doing today? And this is where I stop talking until you start chatting to me. Very good, Eric. I'm doing great if you're doing great. I love that response. Actually, that's not one I use, but maybe I'll start. I would always tell people, I'm fantastic. I still do it today. That's my response. I'm really great. Having an amazing day. This day couldn't get any better. If you're doing half as well as me, you're doing well. That's the type of response I always use. It's a bit of a mental game because it's telling me I'm feeling good, even if I'm not feeling it. It's talking myself into feeling positive. Right now, during these difficult times, I've translated that into a new phrase. I'm stealing it from my father-in-law, actually, but I think it's brilliant. Many times we're asking each other, how are you doing with COVID? How are you doing with lockdown? And, you know, there's a lot of people getting really bogged down with this as I lower myself in my chair. When people ask me, I say, do you know what, actually? I'm having a great COVID. You know what? I have more time available to exercise. I'm exercising every single day. I've actually lost weight. I'm eating better. I've had time to write a book. I haven't lost any clients. In fact, I gained 5. And I'm spending more time at home with my wife and my little co-pilot dog. I'm having a great COVID. There's plenty that I'm not enjoying, but that's not what I'm focusing on. So I'm saying this to remind yourselves to change your vocabulary, to project a positive image, even if there's something nagging in your back of your mind saying it's really not that great. And if you struggle with this, if you're really not a generally positive person, do what I started doing as a teenager. Wake up in the morning and I want you to think at the beginning of the day, right away, what is the good thing I can look forward to today? You can find something every day. It might be your favorite TV show that night. It might be taking your dog for a walk. It could be meeting someone for a drink outdoors or a coffee. It could be a Zoom with your family. It could be your favorite day at work because there's no meetings. Whatever it is, focus on that one good thing throughout the day. And if you start doing this on a regular basis, it's going to start changing your mindset to look at the positives, not the negatives. And that's what you need to do to convey positivity in the workplace, which is going to allow yourselves to come out of a crisis stronger than you were hit during the crisis. I could talk for hours on positivity, but I'll move on, but not before giving you a quick reading recommendation. The Power of Positive Leadership by John Gordon is a terrific book with multiple strategies to increasing positivity in the workplace. He wrote another great book, The Energy Bus, about getting positive people on board, which builds on a lot of those concepts. So from positivity, let's move on to urgency. Urgency in these times, being the first to market, being the first to introduce a new idea, the first to respond to an inquiry, the first to pivot, the first to react, the first to solve, the first to thank, the first to remember. Would you say that all these statements could be related to a successful person or company? Of course you would. They sound very positive. All of these situations that we're in need us to work with a sense of urgency, to be first. And there's never been a more important time to act with urgency than during this pandemic or during a crisis. You know how quickly things have changed, how often we've got new rules to work by, new phases of lockdown, 72 hours to lockdown. If we didn't have a sense of urgency, that wouldn't have happened. And if you don't, you could lose out in so many ways. You could lose money, you could lose customers, you could lose your business if you don't act with urgency. There's never been a more important time to act quickly. But urgency requires focus. It requires your full ability to focus on the things that are most important. And in doing so, we bring things into focus. You have to be really clear on what your big goals are. If your goal is to reopen your property, as you've just got the announcement that the rules have changed, that's got to be your singular focus. Maybe you're not going to worry about the EDM for the week or what's going to be on some menus in a month's time. You have to put 90% of your efforts, I'm saying realistically, 90% of your efforts behind your focus in order for you to move fast. Everyone emerging from COVID at the same time, you have to get ahead of the curve. You also have to use urgency. Perhaps you've experienced this during different times of COVID where your business has been really slow or it's been closed or people have been working remotely. You've actually got to overcome a bit of inertia that your team may have from working at a lower occupancy or a slower pace or from home. And you need to use this trait to overcome it. And my personal prediction is that our industry is going to rebound faster than we might imagine in the coming months. I know there's a lot of common thought about this, but my belief is whatever we think about vaccines today will be different in a week's time and very different in 2 weeks' time. And the positivity about vaccinations and their impact is going to change very rapidly. And that is going to cause us to have to respond urgently to a growing sense of optimism and a burst of travel relief that will come from vaccinations. Because today, there's maybe not many vaccinations happening. But I think back to 10 months ago, how many tests a day were being done? It was all about testing. Maybe there were 100 tests getting done, or maybe 1,000 tests getting done. Today in the United States, we don't even think about the fact that there's almost 2 million tests a day being done. That's ramped up very, very rapidly to the point of a norm. And I think with vaccinations, that's going to be the same. And that is going to cause this spurt, this rebound that is going to happen sooner and faster than we might be able to imagine today. And we're going to need a sense of urgency to react to it. So think back to businesses reacting as we went into lockdown. This classic example happened back on the 16th of March, 2019. A company that worked with great urgency, not necessarily for their own benefit, but to pivot what they were doing for good. LVMH, many of you heard that story. 16th of March. Do you remember in Nevada, I think it was the 13th of March we were locked down. Maybe Europe it was a little earlier. But by the 16th of March, they had pivoted to stop producing colognes and perfumes to focus on creating sanitizer. They were first to announce doing that, and they got a lot of great coverage for it as well, let alone doing good for their communities. Now it's time for you to talk again. Use the chat box. Who can share any examples of a quick pivot that was done with a sense of urgency that you, in your business, you or your business made during the last 10 months during the pandemic? Any good examples that you can share? You know, I'm not moving on until someone shares. Packing meals, brilliant. I saw a lot of properties on the strip corridor were packing meals to give to the homeless, delivering hot breakfast to guests rather than them coming down. New emergency procedures dedicated to how we now operate. It's a whole new binder, this thick, that had to be created, but with a sense of urgency so that you could capitalize on opening from day one. Mobile check-in. More intentional communication from leadership regarding the path forward. Thank you, Alicia. I'm going to come back to you any minute now. Meal deliveries to high risk. These are great examples. And you had to do all of these with a sense of urgency. So here's an interesting reading recommendation as we talk about urgency. The book Essentialism is a really powerful book in talking about identifying your focus, identifying your priority. I think there's a line in there that says we shouldn't have priorities plural, we should only have one priority. This book of Essentialism is all about how you can cut a lot of the fluff and the noise out of your day-to-day duties and narrow it down to a focus that allows you to deliver things with a sense of urgency. Yep, glad you liked it too, Brittany. Next, vision and communication. Someone, was it Alicia, just talked about that? Thanks for the perfect lead in there, Alicia. Vision and communication. This is such a key ingredient of leadership at any time, but in a time of crisis, it's more important than ever. If you take your own picture of the future and combine it with your team's creative view, using creativity and innovation, and then paint the picture that leads to it, it's extremely powerful in moving your business forward, but especially powerful in times of crisis. And your ability to share your belief in that future state and do it articulately and communicate the path to get there, not just what the idea is, and do it with a sense of urgency, will allow you to really build your team to move behind you. And with a sense of positivity, trust that things are going to be okay. And even better, do it with a rally cry that your team can get behind to achieve this. A lot of the work that I do around building service cultures focuses around coming up with a rally cry that is simple to understand and is a daily reminder of how they go about delivering your vision for the business. At another time, I can share lots of examples of those. We have a lot of fun putting them together. But here's a flash warning about your vision. You can have a huge, lofty ambition. It could be a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. But don't let that vision be a pie in the sky idea that no one believes can be achieved. You've got to know it can be achieved. You've got to have a vision for the path that will get you there. Because otherwise, your team are going to think that your head is in the sand. So when sharing your vision, you have to be able to paint the picture of how you're going to get there. As we opened the Mandarin Oriental here in Las Vegas 11, maybe 12 years ago now, we lose time so quickly, Our vision was to gain the triple Forbes 5-star award in our first year of operation. Huge, big, hairy, audacious goal. To achieve a 5-star award in your first year is very hard to do, but to achieve the triple hotel, restaurant, and spa, I don't know that it had ever been done. But everything we did pre-opening and everything we did once we started operating was around that vision. And we shared as a leadership team the ways we could all contribute to getting there. So we painted the picture of how we would do it. And by doing that and communicating frequently, just constantly, and building the passion around this vision with the path of how to get there and what everyone's part they played, that helped us get closer to that vision. And guess what happened in the first year? This is where if we were live and in person, you'd say, you got the Forbes 5-star award for the hotel, the restaurant, and the spa. Well, actually, no, we didn't. The spa did. So proud of them. Amazing achievement. But the other two didn't. But because we'd shared that vision so clearly, because we communicated so regularly, because we paved that path of how we would get there, our team still believed it could be done. And in fact, they doubled down their effort. They didn't lose belief. They didn't have despair. They tried even harder. They fought even more toughly. They worked longer. They did more. They committed at the highest level. And a year later, we did indeed achieve that vision. But it was through great communication and a clear path that was demonstrated how we will do it that it was achieved. So now in times of crisis, communication is incredibly powerful and essential. That's why we talk about it in these times. In fact, I think you need to communicate a lot more during times of crisis. In fact, if during the last 10 months you think you're communicating a lot, if you think you're communicating enough, I would say go back and do more. You can't do enough. I used to be the general manager of the Mandarin Oriental in San Francisco, and we went through a very tough time at the end of my tenure there because the hotel got sold and was going to be rebranded. Some of you might note that that's the story of my career, but that's a whole other story. But in San Francisco, there was a 60-day window for this to happen. And it happened overnight. And our team, their eyes were wide open. And of course, you can imagine there was a sense of panic. In this crisis, I did exactly what I said. I thought I was communicating a lot. I thought I was doing enough. And so I did more. In fact, at that hotel, it was very hard to pull everyone together on a daily basis. But we had every other day, we had an all-manager meeting so that they could spill communication down. And every single day, I sent an email out to all users, and it was entitled, What I Learned Today. And I told them transparently any update that I'd got a hold of that day. It instantly curbed panic. It instantly curbed rumors, and it instantly filled everyone with confidence as to what was going on. And on the days I learned nothing, I said, I learned nothing today. Have a great day. But there's still this touch point of communication. It kept everyone incredibly calm, and it was the most seamless transition that you could have imagined. And when communicating, particularly if there's a vision involved, remember to tell stories. Package it as a story. It's easier to understand, it's easier to remember, and it's easier for people to build a picture in their minds. Actually, on another conference I was on last year, there was a great speaker, Mickey, I've just forgotten her name, forgive me, who really talks about communicating only through stories and the power of that. And I went to see if she had a book and I couldn't find one. So here's a sort of a cheat of a book recommendation for this topic. And it's a real favorite of mine, Atomic Habits. It kind of changed my COVID. I read it a year ago at the beginning of COVID. Atomic Habits. It's about tiny incremental change every day. that leads to vast differences. And the reason I bring it up here is, how can you build this habit of regular communication and sharing your vision through regular communication? Atomic Habits changed my life during COVID positively. I started writing for half an hour every day, and I've almost finished my book. I started running every day. Wake up in the morning, I figure out what I'm going to wear, look at the temperature, what am I going to wear today, and what route will I run. And every day, what is today? For 308 days, I've run back to back. I've created a habit that's just been tiny incremental change. And yes, I saw the question here. I'll speak to Irving and Diane. We'll get a list of these books out to you all after the session today. So here are the 5 leadership traits that I've just blasted through. Amazed myself. I actually did it in approximately the time I promised myself to do it in. But each of these play a part in responding and bringing your best leadership to the fore during these difficult times of crisis. Did you notice, though, how often, as I was speaking, they all relate and support to each other? It's very powerful how they all work hand in hand. And I'm sure you may be the first to say, well, what about this leadership trait? What about that leadership trait? And everyone has different ones that they lean on. But really, after a lot of study between Amy and I, we boiled it down to these 5. And the businesses that we've helped along the way have really seen greater success and become more nimble and survived better than their competitors by focusing on these traits in the last 10 months and going forward. So how do you feel about these traits now? I'd like you to get your annotate feature on again and use your spotlight arrow once again. This time, I'd like you to be honest and say, having learned about these, an old boss of mine once said, we all have a slice of the pizza missing. No one's perfect. No one's good at everything. If these were 5 slices of the pizza, which one of these are you missing? Which one of these do you need to focus on more? Keep clicking away. Because interestingly, some of these are a little bit different from when we looked at it the first time. Which one you related to the most? See quite a bit of creativity and innovation, positivity, and some empowerment. Fantastic. Well, with that, are you ready for a shameless plug? Okay, I can't hear you, so I'm going to give you a shameless plug anyway. Thanks for annotating and sharing your views. So how does this relate back to the leadership kits that I mentioned earlier today? We developed these leadership kits because, well, Amy and I had developed a program to do a day-long strategy session with businesses on these topics. Time was of the essence and people didn't have money and people weren't comfortable getting together. And we said, well, how else can we help our community? We said, how else can we share this knowledge and share this enthusiasm in a more accessible way, an accessible price point, and in a way that is very versatile that people can use no matter how they're working during these difficult times. And we created these leadership training kits. So there's 5 kits that have been developed around each of the 5 leadership topics that I've talked about today and just given you a flavor of. The leadership kit comes with all you need to use to facilitate about a 90-minute training session for your leaders. It's designed for leaders that have leaders working for them. Inside the leadership kit, that's this big box you see behind me here, you get 10 individual participant kits. And in this participant kit, you have all the things that the participants need to become involved in a presentation. We've designed it particularly because so many people are working in a virtual world. So the same way I've tried to get your involvement through chats and through using the annotate function today, We can change what is just a normal two-dimensional experience like this into a three-dimensional experience, because now your participants have something in front of them, even if they're sitting at home. You put a mailing label on their kit, you send it out to them with enough time to get there before your session, and you tell them, don't open it until we start. And when they open it, they see it's time to think inside the box. Isn't that clever? Hence the title of this presentation. And in there, they get instructions for each of the activities. Each session has 4 different interactive group activities that work over Zoom, as well as they do in person. So they get the instructions for each of those, and they get all sorts of little things to engage them during the session in different ways. This particular box is about creativity and innovation. They'll get this sheet that they use to record their work that they will do as groups as well. And many other elements that will become a surprise for them and keep them engaged in a 3-dimensional way. As a leader, you might not feel like you're the most confident presenter, or you might think, well, what do I know about creativity and innovation? The design of the box means that in there you have everything you need to facilitate the training with an hour or less of preparation. Now, you A-types out there, you might do a little more than an hour of preparation because you want it to be perfect. But in there you have a PowerPoint presentation on a USB stick, along with videos that can be used, or videos you can use to familiarize yourself with what's going on. You have a leader's guide that takes you through how to use everything in the box and how to lead people through the exercises. And in every box, on every topic, there are at least 3 interactive exercises that you do as a group. And these are designed not just to give people knowledge around this specialist topic, but to be used as team building exercises at a time where your teams could be quite disparate, or at a time where you might need team building more than ever to create all the outcomes that we've talked about during the session today. So my little shameless plug, since we're all on the call together. And the great news for you is that for the NHLA, we're really delighted to extend a very special offer to make these boxes even more accessible. We're selling these boxes to any industry, anyone in any industry, any leader. But our hospitality industry, we know, has been one of the hardest hits. So we have a very special 30% discounted offer for anyone on this call, or in fact, anyone in the NHLA. Tell your friends that are members. You can buy a single box on a single topic for now just $350, or you can buy the subscription series of all 5 boxes for only $245 per box. The boxes get released once per month, 1 different topic every month. So if you got really excited about positivity, it's not available today. Creativity and innovation was the first box that we launched, but in a couple of months, you would be able to buy the single positivity box. Or today, you can sign up for all 5, and they'll arrive on your doorstep like Christmas came once a month, giving you this great opportunity and very easy opportunity to add value to your team, add knowledge to your team, and create an environment that is going to not just survive during these difficult times, but thrive. And if you haven't already, you can actually just scan that QR code. That'll take you to a special microsite that we developed just for NHLA with your unique pricing. So before I finish up, I'm going to give you my email address because I like to be interactive in case you hadn't noticed. I really would love to hear from you after this session today. And as much as I said, to get something out of this, take notes. Think about who you're going to share your learnings with. Think about what learnings you're going to implement. And I'm now going to say, what leadership trait are you going to focus on, and why? To change how you can survive, thrive, not survive. I really would love, as soon as you hang up from this, send me an email at donald@dbowman Consulting. I really would love to hear from you. What leadership are you going to focus on and why? Also, you can shape our future at Rethink and Reset. I'd like to hear from you. Knowing creativity and innovation is available right now. Which leadership trait box would you like us to release in February as our second box? Which one are you dying to get your hands on? And lastly, and perhaps for me most importantly, I would love to get your feedback on today's session. Did I drag on? Did you actually not listen? Were you doing your email the entire time? Were you interviewing someone during this because it was so boring? Which bits stood out the most? How did the interactivity work for you? And so on, because I do this all the time in my work. I do many leadership training sessions, many service culture training sessions, and many times with large groups. So any feedback that you'd be prepared to share, I would love to hear. So please email me and keep this interactive even after our session. Now, it looks like we're almost bang on time, which is a miracle because I always talk too much. If anyone wants to stay on and chat a little bit, happy to do so. Please email me. But in the meantime, thank you for joining during this season of webinar fatigue. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you got something out of it. Thanks very much for listening. Have a great day. I will stay on in case anyone wants to stay on.